EEOC complaint. Thankfully, we won all those complaints. And this is where so much of DEI comes in. So because you're so afraid of big government coming in, the leviathan of the anti-racist state, they try to impress companies, impress the government, show how committed we are to diversity. Companies know that they could be attacked at any time on the grounds of disparate impact. So they try to look good by having a massive DEI department. Don't come after us, go after some of the other companies. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. This system has imposed a massive regulatory and efficiency burden on the American economy. DEI, in my opinion, is the greatest silent regulation on American prosperity. DEI, affirmative action, and disparate impact. That is the evil trinity. That is the sinister triad, the three horsemen of the death of merit. DEI, affirmative action, and disparate impact. Most people don't even know what those words would mean. Maybe affirmative action 5 or 10 years ago, but it's been enveloping businesses, entrepreneurs for quite some time. Companies are terrified of a disparate impact complaint. The system has imposed a massive regulatory and efficiency burden. It's turned into a war against merit and against freedom. We've basically made it illegal for companies to simply try to hire the most talented people for a given job. And don't be surprised, our companies are not as innovative as they used to be. This needed to change, and now the Trump administration is finally changing it. To go deeper, we've actually seen a decline in standards and performance. In 2022, the Los Angeles Unified School District removed requirements for algebra proficiency. Why? Because they said black students don't do as well in algebra. So, after they removed the algebra proficiency, black students got even worse at algebra, showing that lowering standards didn't actually improve outcomes. Disparate impact penalizes neutral and effective criteria. The use of standardized testing in New York City schools was curtailed due to racial disparities. Yet these schools produced more national merit scholars per capita than other states, highlighting that merit-based selection correlates with excellence. This is how they're getting rid of the SAT. They're getting rid of the ACT. Here is the best way that I can summarize it. Effectively, you end up, disparate impact means punishing the test when students fail, not punishing the students when they fail the test. Instead, they're trying to rework the test, not try to improve the excellence or the merit of the applicant or the future student or worker at your company. ReliefFactor.com has Z-Factor. If you guys can't get to sleep, you got to check it out right now at ReliefFactor.com. Lack of sleep is no joke. It can impact your entire well-being, including whether or not you guys are keeping extra weight on, whether or not you are feeling a little sluggish. Go to ReliefFactor.com. That is ReliefFactor.com to check out Z-Factor. Z-Factor is amazing. It's 100% drug-free. So take a look at it right now at ReliefFactor.com. That is ReliefFactor.com, the 100% drug-free way to be able to get a great night's sleep. Getting a great night's sleep is essential. Go to ReliefFactor.com. President Donald Trump signing the executive order, getting rid of disparate impact. One of the greatest accomplishments so far, and it's not even been 100 days. We'll be right back.
campus to the car, the bullhorn to the microphone. It's the Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, we are going to be on campus tonight at the University of Wyoming. And as you know, YRefi has been the sponsor of this explosive campus tour. Here's I'm debating. Is this campus tour more impactful than the fall? Probably not. The fall was probably more consequential politically. But you could make an argument that there's even more virality and deep penetration of our videos and our content culturally this cycle, this tour, than in the fall. This might be more. Again, we are going to analyze the final numbers when it's all said and done. It's brought to you by YRefi. If you guys have private student loan debt, go to YRefi.com. That is YREFY.com. YRefi should be your go-to place for all private student loan needs. Maybe you know somebody in your life that is suffering from private student loans. Go to YREFY.com. It may not be available in all 50 states. Over $300 billion of private student loan debt is held in this country. It is destroying families. So get out of debt. YRefi.com. YREFY.com. YRefi.com. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast.
We're interrupting this program for a special live report.
Welcome back, everyone. We're taking you to the White House where President Trump is speaking right now, meeting with Norway's prime minister as well. Let's listen in.
But you did a fantastic job, and thank you very much. And I'm glad you're here. Glad we meet each other again under these circumstances. So we'll be meeting in a little while at the Oval Office, and if you have maybe one or two questions, we'll do it now. And after that, we'll go to the Oval.
Mr. President, on Russia, do you still believe that Putin is serious about peace, given the events overnight in Ukraine? And if that bombing doesn't end, are you considering new sanctions on Russia?
So we are thinking that very strongly that they both want peace, but they have to get to the table. We're waiting a long time. They have to get them to the table, and I think we're going to get peace. We want to save 5,000 young people. I used to say 2,500. I now say 5,000. We have, Mr. Prime Minister, we have about 5,000 young people a week that are dying in that ridiculous war. And, I started out because I didn't like all the money that we were paying, and then I realized how many people were dying. And that's by far the more important element right now. I'm saying we can save thousands of people. I don't like that it takes long at all, but I think they both want to make peace. I do believe so. There's a lot of hatred there. There's a lot of very bad blood, a lot of distrust. But I hope we're going to get there for the sake of a lot of young people that are dying.
Mr. President, do you have a deadline for when the party?
I have my own deadline. And we want it to be fast. And the Prime Minister is helping us. He wants it to be fast too. And I think everybody in this, at this time in NATO, they want to see this thing happen. So we have a deadline, and after that, we're going to have a very much different attitude. But I think that has a very good chance of getting done.
Mr. President, what can Norway do to prove that they're an important ally to the U.S.? What can Norway do?
Just keep doing what they're doing. We have a very good relationship with Norway. Great leader, great people. I know many of the people in Norway, and it's truly it's an incredible country. So all they have to do is keep doing what they're doing, I think, is probably the best answer I can give. Yes.
As you pointed out, the former Secretary General of NATO is here, Mr. Stoltenberg. How important is the NATO defense alliance, Mr. President? Is it sacrosanct from your perspective?
Well, it's a very interesting question. It's certainly very important for Europe, and I think without us it wouldn't be as nearly as powerful. And as the former Secretary General, who did a great job, can tell you, I played when I was there a very big role in making sure that NATO is funded by the 28, at that time they had 28 countries, including us, because many of the countries weren't paid, and they ended up being paid, you would say, and the Secretary General was very nice about it as far as I was concerned. Other presidents went in, they made a speech, and they left, and that kept going on, and, in the meantime, they had no money. and the United States was paying far more than its fair share. You could say that they were paying, I actually said sometimes it looked like 100%, and it was unfair. And the two of us worked very well together, and we took care of the situation.
There are some Mr. President.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Regional statistics are showing that the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Norway. Are you going to be looking into that and see which of the countries are actually in a trade surplus?
Yeah, well, with the United States, almost everybody has a surplus.
But not in
It's really an amazing, it's an amazing phenomenon. Now, there's a surplus of $2 billion, I think you have with it. I congratulate you. That's very good. We got to get a little bit of that for ourselves, maybe. But they do have a surplus. Norway has a surplus.
In the current tariff situation, analysts have pointed out that the U.S. actually need allies. Do you consider Norway as a possible ally in the situation?
I think Norway's always been an ally. They've been somebody we've been very close to, very friendly with. Maybe more so now with me than other people, but I think Norway's always been a great ally, yeah. Norway's been a friend.
That's a very strange question, actually, because the U.S. is our lead ally, and we build on a relationship which we will talk about now, Mr. President. But it's of high relevance, and I'm very happy that we have Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. Right. So this is a very strong tie.
But it was a question about ally in the tariff situation specifically.
Tariff situation?
Yes.
Oh. Well, that's we're talking about a little bit different subject then. We're talking about a different type of ally. No, in this case, he would be very much inclined to be an ally of Norway because he wants to make the best business deal possible. And Norway and the Norwegians are great business people. They're great traders. They're great, very smart nation, very well-managed nation. Has been for a long time, and in particular now with this leadership. But we'll be talking about trade and other things, and I think we're going to come to a conclusion very quickly.
Mr. Prime Minister, I was wondering whether you think that Donald Trump, for his effort in Ukraine and otherwise, deserves to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I salute President Trump for having been taking very important initiatives to get this conflict towards an end, which both parties deserve. We need to have a ceasefire, save lives, move towards something which is more secure for Europe, for the people concerned. And on that we work together. And I look forward to go into some details because we are at a critical moment. On that price, that is a committee taking care of that, which is completely working on its own terms, and I cannot comment on that.
Mr. President, question on China.
But thank you very much for that question. I like that question. Yeah, please.
A question on China. Can you clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China? They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China. And so I think you have, Jeff, as usual, I think you have your reporting wrong. Thank you very much. We'll see you. We'll see you inside. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you. Everybody else. Thank you. Thank you. Keep moving, everybody. Keep moving. Thank you. You're out. Thank you.
So you just listened to President Trump and the Prime Minister of Norway speaking there. The two of them are meeting at the White House right now, as you see. A number of things discussed. Both of them talked about the situation between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, let's listen in. It looks like President Trump is still answering some questions here. Apparently not. He is now being asked to leave the office. So let's kind of go in and recap some of what you just heard. President Trump and the Prime Minister of Norway, they're both answering a number of questions about Russia and Ukraine. President Trump says he believes that both sides do want peace there, even though there was an attack overnight involving Russia. That attack on Kiev, which of course is making lots of headlines, and we'll talk a bit more about that momentarily. President Trump also saying that he has his own deadline for when an agreement should be reached. If it doesn't happen by then, he says he's going to take things into his own hands, also saying that there will be measures as a result. Norway's prime minister chiming in as well, saying that there needs to be a ceasefire and that he looks forward to an agreement between Russia and Ukraine on that front. Of course, there was also some conversation about the trade relationship between the United States and between Norway. Both leaders agreed that there is a good relationship between the United States and Norway, both also saying that they're going to be talking about trade and other things and agreeing that both countries are in fact allies. So we'll continue to monitor that meeting between the Prime Minister of Norway and President Trump, which is happening at the White House. We'll be on that throughout the day here on Real America's Voice. In the meantime, President Trump, as I mentioned, rebuking his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin following Russia's latest attack on Ukraine overnight. Quote, "I am not happy with Russian strikes on Kiev, not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done," he writes. That criticism coming in response to Russia's strike on Kiev, which is said to be the deadliest attack on the Ukrainian capital in 9 months. At last check, at least 12 people were reported dead, 90 others injured. Search and rescue operations, as you can see in this video, continuing as crews seek to find victims that are buried in the rubble. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is said to have cut his diplomatic trip to South Africa short today in order to return home following that attack. Well, it is clear the president is still pushing both sides to reach an agreement to end the deadly war, despite saying this week that the U.S. is ready to walk away from negotiations if a deal isn't reached soon. Mr. Trump writing in part, "We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete and total mess that would have never started if I were president." The man with no cards that he's referring to, of course, is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Despite today's attack, President Trump appears optimistic about a path forward. The deal on the table would reportedly include Ukraine's acceptance of Russia's annexation of Crimea, lifting sanctions against Russia, and ruling out Ukraine's NATO membership. Zelensky has publicly said that he will not recognize Crimea as Russian territory, which is a major sticking point in the ongoing negotiations. Happening right now, mourners continue flooding into St. Peter's Basilica to pay their respects to the late Pope Francis. So many people have come to see the pontiff that the Vatican decided to keep the doors open all night long due to the higher than expected turnout. Early this morning, the basilica closed for about an hour and a half, but then reopened to welcome the faithful, as you can see here. The Vatican says as of 1 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, more than 61,000 people had visited the Pope. As you can tell again from this live picture, that number has increased significantly. Well, that's going to do it for your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates. Now, let's get you back to the Charlie Kirk Show.
Listening to the future of America, and the future is bright. Here is Charlie Kirk.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. Hillsdale College. As you know, I'm not a fan of almost every college in the country. But Hillsdale College is something unique. It's something different. Hillsdale College is America's greatest college. They hold values dear that you want to pass down to your kids and grandkids. But most importantly, you guys are able to take their online courses for free. Did you study history or economics in school? But if you did, wouldn't you want an enjoyable refresher? There are more than 40 free online courses on almost every topic that you can imagine. The Constitution, the Federalist Papers, the Supreme Court, Shakespeare, Roman Republic, the story of David, the Genesis story, and their new one that I'm thoroughly enjoying. It's on totalitarian novels. In this free 8-lecture course, you'll learn from Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn as he goes in depth on 4 novels: 1984, Brave New World, Darkness at Noon, and That Hideous Strength. Even though these novels were written in the 30s and 40s, they are highly relevant today as they show what a tyrannical government does to human nature. More importantly, they can show us that faith, family, and friends are worth fighting for. Maybe you read these books a long time ago in school. Maybe you've heard others talk about them, and maybe they seem a little intimidating. We'll go to charlieforhillsdale.com. That is charlieforhillsdale.com. America's greatest college. You guys can take the online courses, and you will not regret it. Go to charlieforhillsdale.com, free of charge, charlieforhillsdale.com. Joining us now is Kevin Hassett, the director of the National Economic Council. So much to discuss here. So Kevin, let me begin by this. I'm traveling the country, I'm on tour, and even some Trump faithful are just a little bit confused about the direction of the tariff strategy and all this. They are very well-intentioned, but they want a little bit of clarity. What would you say is the update and the message of the grand strategy to someone that loves President Trump, loves the agenda, but they are seeking clarity on what is happening with all of the announcements, tariffs, and et cetera? Kevin, the floor is yours, and thanks for making the time.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Charlie. Big fan, and also big fan of the Hillsdale courses. I got to tell you, it's really good advice for folks to take those courses. It's way better than just sitting and watching some random TV show at night. The bottom line is that the president has been talking for a long time about how unjust our trade deals have been and how bad for American ordinary folks, ordinary workers they are. I'll give you an example that, there are huge tariffs on Harley Davidsons like everywhere because it's a, famous American product. And the European tariff on Harley Davidson, they hate American output so much that they actually have a tariff on Harley Davidson motorcycles, even if Harley Davidson makes the motorcycle in Europe. Can you imagine? And so our trade deals are filled with things like this that are just unjust. And what President Trump showed in the last administration, where I was honored to be chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, is that when you make better trade deals, then it helps blue-collar wages skyrocket. And so after basically 16 years of the previous four presidential terms, real wages in the U.S. declined. In the first 3 years of the Trump administration, real wages went up for the typical family by $6,500. And the reason was that we put America first. We put America workers first. And so what he's doing now is he's doubling down on that strategy, and he's doing it in Trump time. And as I have an update, which is today, we've just got two more actually written requests for a trade deal with our trading partners that are way better for American workers. Wow. So we're up to 20 written requests and I think 36 negotiations. And the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer is meeting with 14 trade ministers between now and tomorrow. And so what's happened is that President Trump, with his tariffs, has put everybody on notice that, look, you got to be nice to American workers, respectful of our trade. And if you come to the table and do that, then we'll make a deal with you. And the deals are moving forward at breakneck speed.
So I love all of that. And so let's now go deeper into what I think is going to be the great pairing. So we have the tariff strategy and trying to re-domicile American manufacturing. And again, I hope everyone internalized what Kevin just said here, who's the director of the National Economic Council. You cannot even avoid European tariffs if you make your Harley Davidson motorcycle in Europe. So our best products are not even able to be sold in many of these countries. And so we actually have a free market spirit to us using tariffs. I know this is rather contrarian and paradoxical in some ways, but how is it a free trade agreement or paradigm? If you can't sell your stuff, then you're nothing more than one side of free trade. You're just a purchaser. You're not able to actually trade. You're not able to barter. And look, Europe, they play tough. They are protectionist, not to mention China. So I love that. And I think that also there's so much, there are assets here. Let me ask you about liquefied natural gas. I think that's one of the biggest components here. Is that, can we expect some announcements that using tariffs as a negotiating tactic and a leverage tool, we can start to decouple some of our allies from their addiction to Iranian and Russian oil? Can you cue our audience in a little bit on how LNG plays a dramatic role in these negotiations?
Yeah, the LNG is definitely part of the negotiations. It's interesting because I know how studious you are that you picked up on that. But one of the things that we're putting on the table in these negotiations is that we could agree to something called an offtake agreement. And so the idea would be that right now, if you're Japan, you're kind of like hostage to whoever's going to sell you LNG and oil. And if we can successfully expand pipelines in Alaska, then we can fund those pipelines basically with commitments to sell the stuff to Japan because we have enough of it in the U.S. And that's really, really good for Japan. And it makes them so happy to not have to be dependent on oil and natural gas from other sources, or even to have some insurance against the volatility of the price of oil in free markets. That's so valuable to them that they're coming to the table with the best trade deal you ever saw. And I have one other thing to say about the trade deal, which is just it shows the way President Trump thinks, Charlie, which I know you know it very well, is that if you think about it, we just have a sort of an agreement in principle with India that was announced by J.D. Vance, the vice president.
Yes, huge.
And you say, and you would say, why India? Well, it turns out that if you look at the history of non-tariff barriers and not letting us sell stuff in there and all that, that probably the worst actors on earth was India. Like historically, over the last 30 or 40 years, you could argue that the worst actor on trade was India. And so why did President Trump say, okay, our first agreement in principle has to be with India? Because he wants to show that he can make a deal even with the hardest people to make a deal with. And if he can do that, then all the other deals should just fall into place.
So just as kind of like a geeky side point, motorcycles are a huge deal in India. Massive deal. In fact, I believe it is the preferred mode of transportation, much more so than traditional automobiles. And there have been massive import tariffs to be able to import our motorcycles into India. Just something to think about.
85%. 85%.
85%. And so when you're trying, again, there's a lot of consumers there that could potentially want to buy motorcycles, and we want to be able to compete there. So now I want to segue to the second part of the component, and this is where people are missing this. The market is up really generously right now. I'm trying not to stare too much at the market day over day. I tell people, invest for the next 10 years, not for the next 10 minutes. And actually, you know what? Can you comment on that? Can you comment on how you guys have been navigating some of the, let's just say, doomsday propaganda from the media? Because I actually think it's very admirable and incredibly courageous and has remarkable resolve, the fact that you guys have been rather unfazed by the jitters and focused on something much more meaningful and substantive and long-term. Can you comment on that briefly, please, Kevin?
Oh, yeah, sure. And the thing is, the way I like to think about it is that the mainstream media, and then, there are a lot of very partisan Wall Street houses, like go read like what Goldman Sachs says about the economy every time Donald Trump is running for office or as president. They just downgraded the U.S. growth this year to 0.5%, which, is just impossible to be that low. But the point is that what happens in the mainstream media, and sometimes this moves markets for the short term, is that they seem to always expect the worst of Donald Trump. But from anyone with experience knows that you should expect that he's got a plan and he's going to deliver the best for the American worker. And that as that happens, then markets are going to celebrate because it's, the golden age in America again. But what happens is that when we're making changes, then the media is filled with stories that basically characterize him as, not having a plan, and just whatever the worst thing you could imagine about Donald Trump is what they cover every day. But then the best thing you could think happens, and it's over and over again. So why did we get $6,500 dollar increase in wages, real wages for people right before COVID in the first 3 years of the Trump administration after 16 years of nothing under Obama and Bush? Well, the answer is he delivered. He delivered on his promises. He had a plan that was great for the American worker. And so people should sooner or later learn that you're not going to get the worst that you could imagine out of Donald Trump. You're going to get the best.
So we have 2 minutes in this segment. The other component of the conversation is the big, beautiful bill. That is going to make America the most attractive financial market for investment on the planet. Give us an update on the big, beautiful bill negotiations.
Yeah, so the big, beautiful bill negotiations are led by Secretary Bessent and myself as part of the Big Six. The other four are the Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, and the Chairman of the Finance Committee and Ways and Means Committee. And we've been meeting regularly. And through all the stuff, all the news that you read about day in and day out, we've got a massive amount of staff and leadership meeting all the time to make sure that the big, beautiful bill gets into the end zone by, say, June. And I can tell you that it's the talks and the writing of the language is so advanced right now that pretty much the train's leaving the station next week in the House. And so there's been a historically fast progress on the largest tax bill ever that also has a heck of a lot of smart spending cuts as well. And so if you think about it, trade is about 14% of the economy. Not trade or domestic stuff is about 86% of the economy. And we're about to give like an incredible vitamin shot to 86% of the economy. And nobody's even really talking about it.
Well, yeah. And so just to repeat that news, you're saying that it's going to start being introduced in the Ways and Means Committee next week. Is that right?
Oh, well, I'd say that the language is already being finalized next week. And so the House expects that it's going to have a bill passed, maybe the next 3 or 4 weeks. But the point is that you're going to see the bill. You can actually be able to start to talk about it in the news. You're going to start to see the bills next week. Yeah.
Oh, and I don't give investment advice, but I don't think the market will go down with that news. Kevin, stay right there. I want to tell you guys about Alan Jackson Ministries. We have Kevin for another segment here, Director of the Economic Council. Alan Jackson Ministries is amazing. I want to tell you about them. You see, the issue that so many of us have is we fail to recognize that we are in the midst of a spiritual battle. When we are in a spiritual battle, there's things that are happening you don't always recognize. Like, why am I feeling that way? What is happening? Well, I want you to go to alanjackson.com. That is alanjackson.com to get your copy of Angels, Demons, and You. That is alanjackson.com. He is my friend. And by the way, there's so many other great resources there where you guys are able to sign up for daily devotionals. It's called Today with Alan Jackson. He's become a really good mentor and friend of mine. He understands spiritual warfare, and he wants you to be able to have the equipment and the knowledge. So go to alanjackson.com. That is alanjackson.com. So take a look at it right now, alanjackson.com. Email me, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. That is the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. Our podcast is exploding right now. It's doing very well. So download it. We'll be right back with Kevin Hassett as he makes more news on the Big Beautiful Bill.
Charlie Kirk Show, where truth lives.
Welcome back, everybody. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. We continue with Kevin Hassett in just a second. Just a reminder, we're going to be on campus tonight at the University of Wyoming. If you guys live in Wyoming or Fort Collins, come in the car and come to our event tonight. It is going to be packed, so make sure you try to get tickets ahead of time. That's tpusa.com. That is tpusa.com. Fair warning, if you are going to be making a journey, seats do run out at these events, so get there early. We'd love to make sure all of our listeners in the audience can be there, and we'll also try to replay the conversation on Real America's Voice during the evening and also on the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. Next week, we'll be going to University of California, San Diego, UCSD. We have some other fun announcements as well. We are ending our ambitious campus tour with a pretty remarkable, let's just say, crescendo in California. So excited for that. Check out the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. Right now, we are the second largest conservative podcast. It goes Megyn Kelly, ourselves, Tucker, and then Shapiro. That's on Apple News right now. We have some really compelling episodes that I hope you'll take a look at. Episode yesterday is really important. Mass deportations, what is the holdup? Check it out, download it, and text it to your friends. More news is about to be made with Kevin Hassett. Stay right there. Welcome back, everybody. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. Check out the Herzog Foundation at readlion.com. That is readlion.com. Kevin Hassett is with us from the National Economic Council. So tell me more, Kevin, about what we can expect. There are some rumors here about potentially tax raises for the wealthy, a new bracket for 40%. I know the president, he struck down this idea of the millionaire tax. I know you have to keep your cards close to your chest. But conceptually, are we thinking about, closing the carried interest loophole and then also spending cuts alongside of it? What is the philosophical approach you guys are taking every day to these negotiations?
Right. Well, the president has said that he thinks that there might be an argument for a higher marginal tax rate on people who are extraordinarily wealthy, but he doesn't think that now is the right time for that. And I think that it's also the case that if one did try to do that, it might be pretty heavy lift on the Hill. But the main theme really is that we're reducing taxes on ordinary Americans, not cutting taxes for the wealthy. That's not the theme of President Trump's tax cuts. And so on the corporate side, he's creating even bigger incentives for people to build factories in the U.S., to create blue-collar jobs in the U.S., and that's what he's doing on the corporate side. And on the individual side, he's highlighted things like no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security, and so on. And those are his main priorities. I could say that on the individual side, the new tax cuts are going to be, I think, even more impactful than what we saw last time. Again, and those tax cuts were amazing. But if you think about it, right now, for example, if you're a person who just retired and you're getting your Social Security and you decide your Social Security benefit isn't as high as you would like and you want to go back to work, then when you go back to work and you earn $1, they take away 50 cents of your Social Security benefit. Think about it. So the highest taxed people on earth are the people who decide, hey, I need to get a little more money than my Social Security, so I need to go back to work. And then Social Security taxes 50 cents on the dollar before, and then the other taxes on top of it. And so President Trump recognizes there are a lot of people out there who would like to participate more in society, would like to work more, but are discouraged from doing so because of the very, very high tax rates. And that's the real main priority of this bill for us.
Look, I'm at the higher income level. We're very blessed here on this program and podcast. If my taxes, thank you. But if my taxes go up 2 or 3%, I won't be celebrating. However, if there's a deal that is cut to do that and we get spending cuts, I'll say, okay, that's a prudent deal. We have a small increase by 2 or 3%, and we get massive spending cuts. Like, I don't want to pay more in taxes. I'm already, taxed enough already. I get it, but if it helps all of a sudden us get closer to a balanced budget, I'd rather have $1 for my grandkids than 2 extra % of my income. And I say that as someone who is on the higher income ladder. And so I don't know how that's going to float over the Hill, but I think, can you comment on that, please, Kevin, about a minute and a half remaining?
Yeah, I could just say that as an individual, I 100% agree with you. Although I guess government salaries being what they are, I'm not sure I'll be in the top tax bracket this year now that I'm out of the White House. But the bottom line is that there are a lot of people who think that balancing the budget is important, and it really, really is. And one of the interesting things is that I know a lot of people are disappointed in the spending cuts that Congress is talking about. They wish that they would be larger. But one of the things that we have a plan for that hasn't, again, been discussed a lot is that, the DOGE savings are real. The DOGE savings are real. And what we could do throughout the year is that when we aggregate the DOGE savings into something called a rescission package, that we can send a bill up to Capitol Hill and they can pass it without it being exposed to filibuster. So it's the same rules that allow you to pass something with a simple majority apply to the rescissions that we can send back because of all the great work that Elon's doing. And so when you look at the big, beautiful bill and think, well, I really love the tax side, I wish the spending cuts were bigger, just be aware that for the rest of the year, regularly, we're going to be rescinding the wasteful spending of the past because of all the great work that Elon's been doing. And we can do that a bill at a time. We can do that a bill at a time. Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to say you've been one of the best guests in a while. You had incredible insight, and you communicate it in a way where the audience can really understand. So thank you, and please come back soon. I mean that sincerely.
Of course.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Charlie.
Thank you. You know what I like best about him? He was realistic, optimistic, and cheerful. I like those three things. We need more of that. It's very dealing in reality. A great attitude is so much of life. Really is. When we're dealing with economics, a lot of it is attitude. Oh, the world is falling, or oh, we can invest in everything. A lot of it is mindset driven. Positive mental attitude has a lot to do whether or not you're going to succeed. Second hour coming up. Email me freedom@charliekirk.com.
They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
There's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
Back to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. Happening right now, President Trump is meeting with the Prime Minister of Norway at the White House. The two are holding a bilateral meeting during which President Trump's reciprocal tariffs are likely being discussed. They're also expected to answer questions from the media here once again in a few hours. We'll, of course, take you there when that happens. Today's meeting comes as the Trump administration says it expects de-escalation in the trade war with China, which remains the only country not getting a temporary reprieve on tariffs. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent weighing in.
There is an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation. Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together. This is an incredible opportunity.
Meantime, President Trump is coming up, on his 100th day in office. The White House says he'll celebrate it on Tuesday with a rally in Macomb County, Michigan. The area is just north of Detroit, and it's known as an automotive hub. The rally is going to take place one day before the president's actual 100th day on the job. President Trump has recently engaged in talks with Michigan's Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer. You may remember she even appeared with the president in the Oval Office earlier this month. President Trump will return to the state after winning it in the November 5th election and hosting his last campaign rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, just hours before the polls closed on Election Day. Before heading to Michigan, though, the president is set to embark on the first international trip of his second presidency. That will happen tomorrow when he heads to Rome to attend Pope Francis's funeral. Mourners continue flooding into St. Peter's Basilica to pay their respects to the late Pope. So many people have come that the Vatican decided to keep the doors open all night due to the higher than expected turnout. The Vatican says as of 1 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, more than 61,000 people who visited the Pope had showed up. As you can tell, though, from this live video, that number has increased pretty significantly. Look at all the mourners who are still coming through into the Basilica. Meantime, cardinals are continuing to arrive at the Vatican in advance of Saturday's funeral and the upcoming papal conclave, during which the next pope will be selected. The Vatican says 113 of the expected 133 eligible cardinals have already arrived. 2 cardinals say they won't make it to Rome due to health issues. Well, the issue of peace between Russia and Ukraine could come up this weekend as President Trump and other world leaders flock to the Vatican. The commander-in-chief appears to remain optimistic, though, about the continued possibility for a deal between Russia and Ukraine. Despite saying this week that the U.S. is ready to walk away from the negotiations if a deal isn't reached soon, the president says it could actually happen and he's working to make it happen. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates. Tariffs have thrown the global economy into chaos. Potential widespread inflation tied to massive supply chain disruptions is weighing heavily on all of us. But there is a silver lining that most people have missed. President Trump specifically exempted gold and silver bullion from these sweeping tariffs. While these new policies are triggering significant financial chaos, the administration preserved your ability to diversify into precious metals. If you're concerned about your savings, we really encourage you to have a free consultation with the folks over at the Birch Gold Group and their precious metals specialists. The first step is to text the word America to the number 989898 and receive your free no-obligation information kit on gold. Learn how to hold gold and silver in a tax-sheltered account. The Birch Gold Group will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a gold IRA for no money out of pocket. So many people buy gold from the Birch Gold Group, so is it finally time that you do the same? With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied customers, simply text the word America to the number 989898 for more information. Again, that's the word America to the number 989898. You can claim your free information kit right now.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. We now turn our gaze from the imperial capital to the West Coast. I have made an endorsement in the California governor's race, and honestly, it's the least I could do. This man was always so good to me, and he was so generous and so kind and so magnanimous. He had me on his program on Fox News, so thoughtful and smart, and gave me a platform that I'll never forget. And beyond that, I agree with him completely on what he wants to do for California. And I just love his spirit, his spunk, his wit, his charm. And it's Steve Hilton, who is hopefully going to be the next governor of the great state of California. Well, the once great that we want to make golden again. Steve, great to see you, my friend. Congratulations on the launch. Tell our audience all about it. Okay, we're going to get that fixed. Steve was staring into the distance, so we're going to get that fixed. It is SteveHiltonForGovernor.com. Mikey on my team knows that every time I land in California, which is quite often, I'll be there next week quite a lot, I say the same thing. I say, it is a catastrophe. It is a tragedy what they did to this place. What they did to California is one of the greatest acts of self and deliberative destruction in American history. California is a gift from God, objectively. It is beautiful. It's serene. Only in California can you wake up to a sunset surfing, go hiking with your family afternoon, and end the day skiing. And if you really want to, you could drive ATVs on the dunes throughout California. The biodiversity from Yosemite National Park, from Orange County to Santa Barbara to the Bay Area to the Redwoods, there really isn't a place quite like California. And I joke around with my team. I say, if California was like as liberal as, I don't know, if it was like Nevada, if it was as liberal as like a moderate liberal state, I would live in California. It's that beautiful. It's that remarkable. The quality of life used to be something, but it is increasingly out of touch, out of reach. And Steve Hilton is aiming to make that American dream and more importantly, that California dream accessible again. Steve, great to see you. Congratulations on your launch. Steve, tell us all about it.
Thank you, Matt. It's so great to be with you. We are on the road fighting to save California. We're just driving from San Francisco, where we were yesterday, dealing with all those horrendous issues, the complete collapse of civilization that you see on the streets of San Francisco. We're now out on the road to Fresno in the Central Valley, our amazing agricultural heartland. But first, Charlie, I just want to say thank you so much for being part of our amazing event in Huntington Beach on Tuesday. I wish you'd been there to hear the gasp of excitement when we didn't tell people you'd be joining us. We just played your wonderful video, and the crowd was so excited, as was I. And I really, really appreciate your friendship over the years and your support of me in this effort, because it actually means, I say this the whole time, California is too important to let it slide further into stagnation and decline. It's too important for America. Never mind everyone who lives here in California. We've got to turn things around. We've got to end this 15 years of Democrat one-party rule and go in a new direction.
So Steve, tell us the agenda that you presented of exactly your plan to make California golden again.
So it's got to focus on those positive, practical things that are common sense. That term that President Trump uses the whole time, it's exactly right. We've had so much ideology over these past years. That's what's driven all this extremism and ended with those terrible results that we all know. So we just got to think about those basic things. It's a simple story of the California dream. A good job where you make enough to raise your family in a home of your own, a safe neighborhood, with a good school so your kids have a better life than you. That is the ladder of opportunity. Every rung on that has been smashed by Democrat policy. We've got to rebuild it. We've got to allow people to actually live in California. So many families I speak to are young people wanting to have families. So there's no way we can do that in California. It's so tough to live, to just afford the basics. So the number one thing I want to do, the quickest thing we can do to directly put more money in people's pockets, is take working people and working families out of state income tax, because it's insane the level of taxation in California. You add it all up, we have the highest taxes in the country. So the first part of my plan is to take anyone earning $100,000 or less, which is not a big salary in California, considering how expensive everything is, won't pay state income tax. Right now, they're paying 9.3% state income tax, even if you're earning $70,000. It's insane. Secondly, we've got to make it easier to start and run a business in California. I've run businesses both here in America. I've started companies in England. It's so difficult. It's just an endless, insane bureaucracy that's coming out of state government. We've got to cut it right back and allow people to just follow their dreams, and especially small businesses. They're being absolutely hammered by Democrat regulations and insanity from state government in Sacramento. Homes. We have the highest housing costs in America. The number one reason for that, we're just not allowed to build homes anywhere where people want to live. That dream of a single family home. We can raise your kids, the yard, we can enjoy the weather. The Democrats are ideologically against that. They want everyone to live in apartments, density in the middle of cities. That's not the California dream. So we've got to remove those restrictions, get rid of the complexity in all the building codes, make it easier and cheaper to build the homes we want. And then finally, I talk about great kids in the broadest sense. Of course, the school system has to be improved. We have like barely half the kids in our public schools can meet basic state standards in English. For math, it's 33%. Those numbers should be 100%. And the way we do that is to get more transparency so that we can reward good teachers and remove bad ones. And so we've got to have a grade for every school, a grade for every teacher, so that parents can see what's going on. Then you give them the power to make the changes. So that's just the start of it. These are common sense things. Wide agreement. This is not controversial. It's not ideological.
I mean, I agree with every single word you just said, Steve. And you're right, this is not controversial. And I don't know if you heard what I said earlier, but it's a tragedy and a crime against the country what the Democrat cabal have done to California. It is a gift from the heavens. When you go to, if you guys have not spent extensive time in California, you'll know exactly what I mean. There is no state as beautiful as I mean, Alaska's close, but it's a separate issue. I mean, California is its own place amongst the beautiful areas on Earth, really. So, Steve, about a minute and a half remaining. would you argue that decline has been a choice? That California made a choice through its political leaders. Talk about how decline is a choice, and therefore the reversal of decline is equally a choice.
Absolutely nailed it. These are man-made problems, or to be specific, Democrat-made problems. These are policy choices that have given us all these insane costs. There was a time when we had the most affordable homes in the country in California. We would build. That's when the California dream, that suburban life we all imagine is the American dream, that used to happen. We had the most fantastic building and engineering projects in the world. We're literally about to drive past one of them, San Luis Reservoir, just here in just close to the Bay Area, built in the 1960s. We built the state water project to collect the melted snow melt from the Sierras and get it to Los Angeles and the dry parts of Southern California and the Central Valley. We did that a generation or more, 2 generations ago. We've stopped being able to have that ambition and hustle, and that's what we need to get back to. It's all possible and doable if we have the right mindset, the right ambition, and get rid of this far-left ideology that's ruined this beautiful state. That's how we make California golden again.
Steve, stay right there. I'm going to keep you over the break, and I'm going to ask you the question you're probably going to get more than anything else. It's not about tax policy. It's not about schools. It's not about crime. It's not about homelessness. It is the question that you will receive more than any other question. And I want the audience to see if you could guess what that question is. Email me, freedom@charliekirk.com. It's a question, Steve, that you're going to end up rolling your eyes and being like, huh.
I know what's
because I bet you're already getting it. I know what you're going to, so we're going to do it after the break. It's a little teasers. You see, you know how TV works, Steve. You got to try to draw the audience in, right? All right, Steve Hilton, great friend and Patriot. Stay right there. Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/Charlie. That is patriotmobile.com/Charlie. Make the switch today. It's a wonderful way to be able to have your wireless bill be in alignment with your values. Go to patriotmobile.com/Charlie. Patriot Mobile is one of the few carriers with access to all 3 major networks. That means exceptional nationwide coverage. Patriotmobile.com/Charlie or call 972-PATRIOT. And right now use promo code Charlie for a free month of service. When you switch to Patriot Mobile and defend freedom, where every call and text you make, go to patriotmobile.com/Charlie. It's 972-PATRIOT. But did you know that they also got cutting-edge technology, too? Switching is easy. No store visits, no hassle. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Their 100% U.S.-based customer support team can get you help on the phone quickly. Go to patriotmobile.com/Charlie. Make the switch today. Without knowing it, you might be funding woke wireless. Do not do that. Stop doing it. patriotmobile.com/Charlie. Steve Hilton continues after the break with the question he'll get more than anything else, and it's the most important question. What do you think it is? We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. Can we play that Texas A&M B-roll and stuff? I mean, what's happening on these campuses is profound. It's a national news story. Laura Trump was there with us. She actually is doing a special this weekend on Fox News of everything that's happening on these campuses. It's just amazing. Look at that. The energy, the enthusiasm. And tonight, we're going to have another big one, University of Wyoming. All brought to you by YRefi. That's YRefi.com, YREFY.com. Private student loan debt in the U.S. totals about $300 billion. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed. YRefi does not care what your credit score is. YRefi offers a 3-minute rate check without any credit impact. Just call 888-YRefi-34 or log on to YRefi.com. That is YREFY.com. It may not be available in all 50 states. Do you have a co-borrower? YRefi can get them released from the loan. You can give mom or dad a break. Go to YRefi.com. That is YREFY.com. That is YRefi.com. Yeah, can you show that? By the way, the media says like several hundred people showed up. Okay, first of all, that's a couple thousand, and then we had 2,800 people in the auditorium. That's a couple hundred people, according to the media. Literally, that's how they covered it. Right. Be right back. CharlieKirk.com. Steve Hilton continues with us. All right, Steve, you're going to hear this question 10 times a day and 11 times on Sunday. The 3 words, can you win?
So the version of it that I was expecting, John, how the hell can you win in this deep blue state as it's described? Well, here's the plan, and I just want to be really clear with you and with everyone, Charlie. That's why I'm doing this, to be the governor. Not to run a good campaign or to get everyone excited or to help people down ballot. I want to do all those things because I think that we can build a real movement for change in California. But as you know, I've worked inside of a government back in the day in the UK, senior advisor to a prime minister. I know how government works. I can't wait to actually be the head of the executive branch in California so we can actually change things. That's why I'm doing it. So the first point is that California is already much more of a Republican state than people think. The average share of the vote in California for Republicans, even in the last 20 years or so, where there hasn't been the kind of energy we're seeing today, it's over 40, really call it 40%. That's more than a lot of people think. But in the last year or so, you're seeing real energy and change. And I think it's part of the Trump factor that's sweeping the nation. So you look at the last election in California, you had 10 counties flip from blue to red in California, including where I'm heading today, Fresno County, it's the 5th biggest city in the state. These aren't just tiny little rural areas. 10 counties, Democrat to Republican. Then you see what happened on the statewide ballot initiatives. In a way, last November, Republicans won in California without anyone realizing it. The measure Prop 36 to make crime illegal again after Kamala Harris's ridiculous Prop 47 that legalized theft up to $950 a day, the notorious one, that was overturned by 70% majority across the state, but also measures to stop a big tax increase, to stop rent control, to stop the minimum wage rising. Those all passed. The Republican position won on those issues. And then really we got to look at Huntington Beach. That's why I chose that as the location for my launch event. 4 years ago, Huntington Beach, iconic city, the biggest city in Orange County, was run by Democrats, 6-1. And then 2022, a group of very energetic Republicans took over. They won 4-3, did a good job. They removed homeless encampments. They implemented common sense conservative policy. They prosecuted crime. They took the nonsense out of the school libraries. Just last November, they won 7-0. So you have a place that went from 6-1 Democrat to 7-0 Republican in 4 years. The best bit, Charlie, 2 weeks ago, Huntington Beach was rated best run city in California. So it's a great story there. Common sense, Republican ideas. You've got to have that fighting spirit. You've got to have clear, simple ideas that can give people hope. I think everyone understands you need change in California, but they haven't had that sense of this really could happen, so I should get engaged. That's the whole point of my campaign, to say, look, here are the things we can do to make your life better. You've got to vote for change.
Steve, I love that answer. About 2 minutes remaining. So what is your plan? You're going to be going up and down the state, raising money. And what is the timeline? Give our audience a little window into your campaign for the daunting task of winning the governor's race in California.
It's daunting, but it's exciting. I mean, I've already been working on this for a long time. I set up a policy organization, so we got what's called Golden Together, and it's got lots of plans there. But you can see my plan at stevehiltonforgovernor.com, FOR, stevehiltonforgovernor.com, and you've got a whole set of very simple ideas as we've been discussing. I'm going to be a high-energy, high-profile campaign in this state. For too long, I think we haven't taken the fight to the Democrats. They do not have a leg to stand on when it comes to their results. Everything's been a total disaster. I cannot wait to take them on. I'm going everywhere in the state. Day one was Orange County. In the evening, we're in Los Angeles. Yesterday, San Francisco. Today, Fresno. Tomorrow, Sacramento. Next week, up in Napa and Sonoma. There's the whole farming industry there that's being crushed by Democrats. Every day, I'm going to be telling the story of how we can change things for the better. We're going to be putting all out, live streaming our events. I had a policy forum in San Francisco yesterday where we asked questions from the crowd on every single issue. And so this is going to be a very visible, high-energy campaign, and I hope people follow. The best way to follow the campaign, follow me on social media at Steve Hilton X. See you on the road.
Very good. Steve, thank you so much. Talk to you soon. God bless you, and make California golden again. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. See you soon.
Email us freedom@charliekirk.com and subscribe to our podcast. Some breaking news. Our Turning Point USA chapter leader at Westchester University was volunteering ahead of a student event with Chloe Cole, was just assaulted on campus. This is happening almost on a daily basis. The attacker ran up, spat in his face, and punched him repeatedly. He's okay and is pressing charges. We're seeing if we have any video of that. This is the type of, let's just say, danger that our students face every single day on college campuses. Of course, the media will not cover this. They are the violent ones. So pray for your Turning Point USA chapter leader. Get to know them, shepherd them, because they're on the front lines literally taking punches for our republic. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. Mourners continue flooding into St. Peter's Basilica to pay their respects to the late Pope Francis. So many people have come to see the pontiff that the Vatican decided to keep the doors open all night due to the higher than expected turnout. Early this morning, the Basilica closed for about an hour and a half, but then reopened to welcome the faithful. The Vatican says as of 1 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, more than 61,000 people had come to visit the Pope. As you can tell from this live picture, that number has increased pretty significantly. A number of people still there filing in and out of the Basilica. In the meantime, cardinals are continuing to arrive at the Vatican in advance of Saturday's funeral and the upcoming papal conclave, during which the next pope is going to be selected. The Vatican says 113 of the expected 133 eligible cardinals have already arrived. 2 cardinals say they won't make it to Rome due to health reasons. Just hours ago, President Trump followed up his criticism of Ukraine and its president with a similar rebuke of Russia and Vladimir Putin. Quote, "I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. Not necessary and very bad timing, Vladimir. Stop." Capital letters. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done, he writes. That criticism coming in response to Russia's strike on Kiev today, which is said to be the deadliest attack on the Ukrainian capital in 9 months. At last check, at least 12 people were reported dead, 90 more injured. Search and rescue operations continue as crews seek to find victims buried in the rubble, as you can see in this video. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is said to have cut his diplomatic trip to South Africa short today in order to return home following the attack. Meantime, President Trump is coming up on his 100th day in office. The White House says he'll celebrate it on Tuesday with a rally in Macomb County, Michigan. The area is just north of Detroit, and it's known as an automotive hub. The rally will take place one day before the president's actual 100th day on the job. President Trump has recently engaged in talks with Michigan's Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer. You may remember she even appeared with the president in the Oval Office earlier this month. President Trump returned to the state after winning it in the November 5th election. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence.
Greatest American generation. It's the Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. That is freedom@charliekirk.com. Phenomenal guests that we have coming up here in just a second. I want to tell you about the Herzog Foundation. If you guys are looking for private school options to get out of the public school system, Herzog Foundation might be for you. Are you rethinking your child's educational path, wondering if their current school truly supports your family's values? Well, you're not alone. And the Herzog Foundation is here to help you. With the Trump administration working to abolish the federal Department of Education and return control to the states, there's never been a better time to explore Christian education. For too long, federal overreach has dictated how children learn, but now parents have a greater say in their kids' futures. This shift could make Christian education more attainable than ever. The Herzog Foundation is your trusted guide to navigating these changes. Whether families are considering a Christian school, a hybrid model, or homeschooling, they provide the resources families need to make informed decisions. And to stay updated on the latest developments from the Trump administration and how they impact education, turn to The Lion, the Herzog Foundation's award-winning publication. The Lion offers real-time news and insights to keep you informed and empowered. Visit readlion.com to access must-read articles, and don't forget to sign up for the Lion's daily and weekly newsletters. That is readlion.com. Stay informed, stay equipped, and shape your child's future. Portions of the Charlie Kirk Show are brought to you in part by the Herzog Foundation and the Lion. That is readlion.com. Phenomenal guest here. I've taken some of his online course at Hillsdale College. That is charlieforhillsdale.com. It's Dr. Kevin Slack. His book is War on the American Republic, How Liberalism Became Despotism. Dr. Slack, welcome to the program. I want to talk to you mostly about this idea of immigration and the Founding Fathers. I want to ask you, what were the American founders' view on immigration? How did they incorporate that into law? Because if you were to ask just a regular person, they'd say one thing: we are a nation of immigrants, everyone should be welcome, and that's what the founders believe. Was that the founders' view on immigration? Please educate our audience. Take as much time as you please.
No, you know, and some of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin was probably the first to write about immigration. He does this in 1751 in his observations. His real concern was that he had tried to form, this was an extra-legal militia. It was a military association because the Pennsylvania Quakers in the Assembly wouldn't raise money for defense. And so he appeals to all of these different ethnicities in Pennsylvania to unite for the defense of life, liberty, and property. It was a veritable social contract. It was extra legal, and the idea was that they would protect themselves, all these different groups, the middling artisans of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, against threats from the French and pirates on the Delaware as well as on the frontier. And what he saw is that many of the Germans who had come over, they'd migrated en masse to the colonies, had not participated in this effort, even though he tried to woo them into it. And so in 1751, he'd made this effort in 1747. In 1751, he starts railing against the German immigrants. And he says, why are we bringing in all of these German migrants? He says, rather, what's going to happen, they don't learn our language, they don't have our habits, they don't appreciate our laws. And that instead of Anglifying them, they're going to Germanize us. And so he stresses this idea of assimilation. Now, he would change his views on the Germans and the Scotch-Irish over time, but one thing that he stressed, and this was adopted by the other founders, somebody like Thomas Jefferson as well, was the idea of unity. How is it that affection binds a people together to command the kind of sacrifices that are necessary to preserve a people? So when we talk about a people, we say Americans, it means we're presupposing that that entity exists and that it has something in common. And that meant that the foremost, if you read Franklin or Thomas Jefferson, what they really look to is to try to get your own citizens to have more kids. So that was immigration awareness number one, was we actually don't want to bring in lots and lots of immigrants because of certain threats that they pose, although we do admit immigrants. But it wasn't a nation of immigrants. That's a much later teaching that I think you can trace to the 1920s. The idea of a nation of immigrants really takes off in the 1950s. Thomas Jefferson and Franklin, they both really questioned whether we should bring over many of the old world European immigrants. And so I think that's a second point. First, you have the idea of a common mind. What binds us together as a people? And the second was the kind of character. What are the manners and the habits of the people that are coming over? And what kind of institutions will they endorse if they're allowed to vote in our political system? Is it the case that they're going to bring over some of the bad policies and habits that they had left and that they had fled from? So that was the second major important point. It's also the case that if we're going to be honest, the founders' warning to us would be that diversity undermines unity. And that's why, if you get to the first Naturalization Act of 1790, and this is just truth. It may offend us today, but the founders said only free whites could become citizens. And the reason for that wasn't just you have ideas of inequality, natural inequality, but even Franklin in the 1760s, he goes and visits the Negro school, and he says, well, I've changed my mind about these black children. It seems like they can learn just like white children. But even then, he says, I hope that will discourage migration. And the reason that Franklin and Jefferson as well, took this position in Notes on the State of Virginia was they didn't think you could have Republican freedoms if you had a population that was torn apart by faction. And so this becomes, of course, this guides immigration policy, who can become a citizen, all the way until the 14th Amendment and the new Naturalization Act of 1870. And that's when white Americans say, particularly the radical Republicans, they could see that the attempt on the part of the Southerners was to reintroduce slavery through a loophole in the 13th Amendment. And so in the 14th Amendment, they recognized natural-born citizenship for the freedmen, as well as they changed naturalization policy. And so you have whites and blacks can become citizens. This did not include other races. This did not include Asians for purposes of migration, nor did it include Indians. That status would change for Indians under public law in the 1920s. What and why? Why did they do this? Well, I think it was those three basic points. One was how do you have a common mind, the idea of a common citizenry, so you have a country for its citizens. Second, how do we bring over immigrants who are going to share some of our common values This is one of the reasons why the laborers did not want a large number of Chinese immigrants at the end of the 19th century. They were very much afraid that they would bring over a kind of paternalistic view of the ends of government. There's also why many of the Irish pose such a problem. 75% of the Germans, they migrated off to the countryside, but about 75% of the Irish settled down in major cities. And the claim is they brought much of their paternalistic or view of government that focused on patronage. And of course, every time you have mass migration, it increases crime. It also increases the entitlements program or the welfare programs of the localities and the states, and of course today the federal government. And so from 1880 to 1920, we do see a change. We see the admittance of new groups. And I think that for us, and we can look at the last two waves of immigration, this poses a kind of challenge. And that is, in the founding period, they thought diversity undermined the kind of order necessary for Republican freedoms. We have a diverse regime, right? That's what we know. And I think the challenge to us is how do we maintain this sense of unity so we can protect those Republican freedoms and freedom under the law? And so I can go to the last two waves in law. You have 1880 to 1920. These were largely Southeastern Europeans. And that created all kinds of problems, the attempt to assimilate them into the body politic. It was also the case that they introduced new institutions to try to manage the migrants. What we look at as the family courts today. If you read Roscoe Pound, this was the dean of Harvard Law, he's writing about the family courts. And he says these are introduced to manage all of these Southeastern Europeans who are coming over here who don't know our ways. And so in the family court, you don't have due process rights. You have maxims of equity that guide all the rulings of the judge. If you don't follow them, you're in contempt of court. So what happened after the 1920s was two laws passed, 1921 and 1924, and they introduced a national origins quota, and this would have basically froze out those who could migrate to the United States. 70% of all migrants would come from just 3 countries, Northwestern European countries. But the real effect of that immigration law of 1924 was it stopped immigration generally. So the percentage of foreign-born in 1920 was about 14%. When you get to 1960, it's about 4 or 5%. And what that meant was all Americans just had more kids, Americans of all different races, because there was a prioritization on those who were natural-born citizens. The 1965 Immigration Act, as we all know, changed much of that. And one of the great dangers that it introduced was this. At every period of mass migration, whether you talk about the Irish in the 1840s or the migrations from Southeastern Europe, 1880 to 1920, that you had a period of assimilation that followed these waves. What's happened since 1965 is an ever-increasing number of migrants, and it poses that great threat to us that I think the founders warned about, and that is how do we maintain some kind of a unified... Yeah, go ahead.
So, no, please. That was phenomenal. So we have 2 minutes remaining here. And I want to make sure it's very clear. Was diversity a stated value of the American founders? Because we're told that diversity is our strength. Was that a founding value of America? 2 minutes remaining, Dr. Slack.
No, in the terms that we use it today. What kind of diversity was valuable? Well, if you read Madison in Federalist 10, he talks about diversity of talents and property. Yeah, that's valuable. But if you get to the end of Federalist 10, he warns about a lack of any common sense of the whole. And so there's a mean that has to be achieved. And then obviously, again, the founders did not think we could have a racially diverse body politic that would also secure Republican freedoms. And that's why in the Naturalization Act, again, one of the first acts passed by Congress in 1790, only free whites could become citizens. They were afraid. And this is why, James Madison was president of the American Colonization Society. So anytime, I have an establishment Republican, they look at me and they say, well, Madison loved diversity. And you say, he was president of an organization whose end was to ship blacks back to Africa. That's the kind of diversity the American founders thought possible with regard to race. Now, again, we don't agree with that anymore, but I think it remains a challenge to us. And who was around in 2020 that didn't see this appeal to tribalism flare back up? And I think this is where Trump has been excellent in trying to appeal to the things that unify us as Americans.
Dr. Slack, stay right there. We have another segment with you. I want everyone to check out charlieforhillsdale.com. That is charlieforhillsdale.com. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. Check out relieffactor.com. That is relieffactor.com. 100% drug-free Relief Factor is the best way that you guys can get out of pain, knee pain, back pain, joint pain, elbow pain. So take a look at it right now at relieffactor.com. That is relieffactor.com. 100% drug-free Relief Factor. So please take a look right now at relieffactor.com. Give their 3 a quick start. It charges only $19.95, less than $1 a day, and it just takes a phone call. Go to relieffactor.com. It can give you a chance to rediscover the true meaning of living better again. Visit Relief Factor or call 1-800-4RELIEF. That is 1-800-4RELIEF. Relieffactor.com. That is relieffactor.com. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. Get involved with Turning Point USA at tpusa.com. That is tpusa.com. At Turning Point USA, we are on the front lines. Our students are being targeted for their beliefs. They're being assaulted. They're being violently treated. And we are on the front lines at Turning Point USA doing, I think, the most important work. I think we are the most important organization in the country. I'm very biased by saying that. But go to tpusa.com. That is tpusa.com. Email me, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. We're going to keep on this question of the Founding Fathers' intent on immigration. I can't say enough good stuff about Hillsdale College and their online courses, charlieforhillsdale.com. We're going to talk about the 14th Amendment, actually. It's timely. We'll be right back.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. I encourage you to subscribe to the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page. The podcast is doing very well. You can listen to all of our conversations on demand, including things that are not here aired on Wonderful Real America's Voice. I also want to make sure you guys download the Real America's Voice app. We stream live every single day, and if you want to watch us live, including Jack Posobiec and Eric Bowling and John Solomon and Steve Bannon, what a lineup Rav has put together here. Check it out at the America's Voice app. That is the Real America's Voice application. Parker and Rob do a great job there. And they take so many of our events live, and we deeply appreciate that. That is the Real America's Voice app. I will be heading to Laramie, Wyoming momentarily to speak to a massive group of students at the University of Wyoming. And then we're going to keep our crisscrossing across America. Next week, we have an emphasis. I'm going to Denver, and then we have an emphasis on California. We're going to be 2 weeks basically in California, all over there, ending our campus tour with over 27 campus tour stops in a short period of time. The most we've ever done, and I think the most anyone's ever done. Show me someone who's visited that many with this kind of intensity for this period of time. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. Dr. Slack continues with us. The book is War on the American Republic, and also charlieforhillsdale.com. That is charlieforhillsdale.com. I need to ask about the 14th Amendment. Do you believe the intent of the 14th Amendment was to apply to the children of illegal aliens? Do you believe that was the original intent? And how should we think about it in a modern context?
No. I think it's kind of absurd that those who ratified the 14th Amendment would have thought that it applied to the children of illegals. Even when the Supreme Court weighed in to establish those who were born on U.S. soil were U.S. citizens, that it was for a migrant worker who was here legally. So no, I don't think it applies. Obviously, in the 14th Amendment, you've got that clause that talks about those who are not subject to a foreign jurisdiction. And all those who are illegal immigrants would apply, that they would be classified under that clause. So the Supreme Court's never ruled on that. We can see a case like Plyler v. Doe. They've talked about certain rights of the children of illegal immigrants to education in the United States. But Supreme Court's never actually ruled on that question, whether birthright citizenship applies to those who are here illegally. Not legally, those who are here to work, but those who are here illegally.
Very good. And so going back to this idea of the founders and their intent on immigration, it seems as if we are just constantly flooded with this idea that we must allow in the entire world and the entire planet. You said something noteworthy to me, which is faction. It seems as if we are suffering under great faction here in this country. In fact, it seems as if we are a nation of strangers, not a nation of neighbors, that we all have different origin stories, sometimes different languages, and we are ships passing in the night. Talk more about the founders' caution around faction and connect it to some of the things that we're experiencing today in 2025.
Well, you know, Madison, he defines faction in Federalist 10. He says any time that there is an individual or a group whose ends would deprive other citizens of their rights, that's a faction. So he's in favor of interest groups. But the real caution that I think the founders give us with regard to faction of ethnicity, race, those kinds of things, is you begin to see yourself as a member of a certain insular tribe. That's why they're cautious about some of these religious groups. You know, Roman Catholics, Jews, they were less than, you know, maybe 1% of the population. So Federalist 2 talks about all the things that would unite a people, and that would be a common language, common customs, common religion, common ethnicity, migrating from the same parts of Europe. So that was their idea as to what would help root a people, that would help to maintain the affection that would preserve the common and the common good. I think what we've seen, and this is particularly since, I mean, we see two movements of this. The first one begins in the 1920s, and that's where you have certain thinkers who begin to argue that they ought to be able to maintain their group identity as well as be citizens of the United States. And so the argument there is America is nothing but an idea. And that really begins, as best as I can tell, in the 1920s. And so you have Elaine Locke talking about the new Negro and blacks being able to retain their own identity. You have the same thing for Jews in the 1920s, talking about how all these groups, they ought not to have to assimilate, but rather America is just a mere idea. It has no common ethical principles, and of course they extend that to religion and all these other things. The danger with that is, in that kind of mentality, is that once you begin to import more and more groups, they keep their tribal identities, and there's no longer a pressure to assimilate. And by the time you get to the late 60s, then the problem is that in the interpretation of what, you know, the 64 Civil Rights Act, whether you agree with it in relation of the government, federal government to private business or not, that what had been a colorblind act, at least in its intentions, was interpreted in a very lawless way to begin to recognize different groups. And you have to understand, this is why the founders revolted, that they revolted against the British Empire because in the British Empire, you were accorded certain privileges and duties, not based upon equal citizenship, but based upon your overlapping assigned group identities. And that's what we see beginning to happen in the 1970s through the EEOC, Title VI and Title VII, as well as even in Title IX, that in a very lawless way, we begin to manage and balance these different groups that only have their own interest in mind. You can see this, by the way.
We're interrupting this program for a special live report.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's take you to Washington, D.C., the White House and the Oval Office, where President Trump and the Prime Minister of Norway are meeting right now. Let's listen in.
Thank you very much. We have Jonas Gahr Støre here, who is as you know, the Prime Minister of Norway. He's a great gentleman, highly respected, beloved in his country. And we've had talks on the war with Ukraine and Russia and trade. We're doing very well, I think, on both. We've had some pretty good movement in every respect. The war is very important that it ends with, I used to say, 2,500 people a week dying, young people, mostly soldiers from Russia and Ukraine. And we want to end that war. We want to end it quickly. And I think we've made a lot of progress, and we'll see what happens. This next few days is going to be very important. Meetings are taking place right now. Additionally, we talked about trade, and we get along very well on trade. We'll do something, but I think the Prime Minister knows that over the years, the United States has been very good to a lot of people, and it's time for us to benefit also. So we're going to have a good relationship on trade, and we discussed other things also. But Mr. Prime Minister, it's an honor to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. This year is 200 years since the first immigration from Norway to the U.S. We come here early in your term. Appreciate that you take time. We have highlighted that very close cooperation. We are allies. We look after security in the north, in the Arctic, a lot of confidence between our services. We have discussed in detail the war in Ukraine. I have saluted the President for his initiative to make progress towards something that can be a ceasefire and an end to this terrible conflict. It is a complex picture, but it needs political will and push, and we have exchanged ideas on that. And then I think the President and his team have been open to hear our perspectives. And on trade, we have also emphasized that we can benefit, both of us, by trading. We can be complementary. And we can find good solutions. But first of all, I appreciate, Mr. President, the spirit and the tone of this conversation, which has been confirmation of a very strong partnership.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions?
Yes. Mr. President,
Anybody?
have you spoken about the tariff that you want to impose on
can you guys record
Norway?
this?
Is there a chance that you can lower
We spoke about trade, and we understand each other very well. I think we'll have no problem.